Attorney General Tan Sri Idrus Harun says the decision to go with compounds rather than criminal proceedings against Serba Dinamik Holdings and its executives was made after taking into account, among others, the circumstantial nature of available evidence against the company as well as the economic consequences of a trial. In a statement, he said the Attorney General's chambers is mindful of the standard proof required of the prosecution to prove the charges based on the evidence available and is strongly of the view that compounding the offences allegedly committed by Serba Dinamik and its executives is the most appropriate action to take under the circumstances. Additionally, he said, Serba Dinamik and its executives were willing to accept the maximum compound imposable by the Securities Commission. In light of this, he said public interest would be better served by compounding the offences, and this had immediately achieved the need for punitive action without the process of a lengthy trial. This, he said, allows Serba Dinamik to redirect resources and time to coordinate with the authorities to comply with the law. Plus, he said the impact of the charges on the group would have been disproportionate to the severity of the alleged offences. Idrus pointed out Serba Dinamik currently faces winding up petitions from creditors, which jeopardize the livelihood of its employees and the interest of shareholders and other creditors. So, compounding the offences is an adequate form of punishment. Earlier today, Serba Dinamik and its 4 top executives were given a discharge and acquittal after paying on Monday a total of 16 million ringgit in compounds issued by the Securities Commission. The 4 top executives, including controlling shareholder and Group MD and CEO Datuk Dr. Muhammad Abdul Karim Abdullah, were acquitted in the Kuala Lumpur Sessions Court this morning. At the close, Serba Dinamik's shares were up 41.18% at 12 cents, giving the company a market capitalisation of 447.26 million ringgit. Bank Negara Governor Tan Sri Shamsiah Muhammad Yunus says pegging the ringgit to the US dollar is not in Malaysia's interest. This is because it will pose a great risk to the country during the current difficult global environment. She said a flexible foreign exchange policy is able to absorb economic shocks and maintain the country's competitiveness. The central bank governor explained that certain conditions apply when a currency is pegged to another currency. She said these include the loss of monetary policy independence. As an example, she said if the US raises interest rates, Malaysia will have to raise interest rates as well, which would spell for Malaysians the highest borrowing costs, even though the economy is weaker than the US at this point. She said Malaysia would also have to resort to capital controls, and this will also have a detrimental effect on the investors' sentiments, affecting not only foreign direct investment coming into Malaysia, but also exaggerate capital outflows from Malaysia. At last look, the ringgit was at 4.3968 against the US dollar. Shamsiah was speaking at a press conference in conjunction with the release of Malaysia's economic figures for the first quarter of 2022. According to Bank Negara, Malaysia's economy expanded by 5% year-on-year during the 3 months through March. This growth was mainly supported by improving domestic demand as economic activity continued to normalize with the easing of curbs. Headline inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, stood at 2.2% in the first quarter, while core inflation was recorded at 1.7%. Malaysia has bagged almost 2 billion ringgit in investment via semiconductor company TFAMD Microelectronics Penang following the handover of MIDA's approval letter to the company. According to Bernama, Senior Minister and International Trade and Industry Minister Datuk Sri Muhammad Azmin Ali said the investment is for the company's expansion plan, which is poised to create 2,000 high-value jobs for Malaysians. He said this is aligned with Malaysia's direction direction towards fostering innovation and high-impact value-adding for local businesses and remaining as the manufacturing hub of the region. Azmin tweeted this after witnessing the handover ceremony along with PM Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob in Washington, D.C. He said TFAMD has pumped in some 900 million ringgit in Malaysia to date and that its growth journey with the country spans 5 decades. The company, he said, has been investing in Malaysia across different parts of the semiconductor value chain through the years and has played an integral role in developing the capacity and capability in the country's semiconductor ecosystem today. Mr. DIY Group Malaysia says its first quarter FY22 net profit fell 19.46% to 100.5 million ringgit from 124.79 million ringgit a year ago due to higher expenses that are in line with higher store openings. According to its bourse filing, quarterly revenue, however, climbed 4.02% to 905.16 million ringgit from 870.18 million ringgit a year ago, driven by contribution from new stores. It declared an interim single-tier dividend of 0.7 cent per share. During the quarter, its store network grew by a net 47 stores, comprising 44 new Mr. DIY Express stores, 2 new Mr. Dollar stores, and 1 new Mr. Toy store. As at March 31st, 2021, total number of stores stood at 947. It aims to open 133 more stores across all brands this year. Meanwhile, its cash flow and balance sheet remained healthy in the first quarter, with net cash flow from operations standing at 79.6 million ringgit, while net gearing ratio remained at 0.01 times. Mr. DIY CEO Adrian Ong said the group has made significant progress over the last 2 years, despite facing various challenges amid the pandemic, and the retail chain is positive about the future under the new normal. Mr. DIY rose 3.5% to 3 ringgit 55 for a market value of 21.55 billion ringgit. Berjaya Foods' share price reached a record high today as investors continued to react positively to the Starbucks and Kenny Rogers Roasters franchise operators' latest financial results. Berjaya Food, which opened at 4 ringgit 8 cent, 3 cent higher from its last adjusted closing price of 4 ringgit 5 cent a day earlier, shot up by 12.84% to peak at a high of 4 ringgit 57. It had gains to settle at 4 ringgit 56 a piece, still up 12.59%, giving it a market capitalization of 1.78 billion ringgit. The counter was also the third top gainer for the day. On Wednesday, Berjaya Foods said its third quarter FY22 net profit more than doubled to 31.58 million ringgit from 11.61 million ringgit previously, as revenue jumped 35.37% to 246 million ringgit from 181.73 million ringgit due to higher same-store sales growth, particularly from Starbucks cafe outlets. It declared a single-tier third interim dividend of 1.5 cent. On prospects, Berjaya Food expects its overall operating results to be satisfactory for the remaining quarter of FY22, following further easing of restrictions and the opening of international borders.